right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast to coast radio show that's all about the information economy. Inside Analysis, yours truly, Eric Kavanagh, is here with an old friend who knows a lot about the AI industry. In fact, he's the chief AI officer right now for a very interesting company, Velatura. They're a public benefit corporation, so they're out there doing good for the world. And they're helping us out in the world of healthcare data and information. But Prashant's been all over the place. He knows data science, he knows data, he knows analytics, he knows all these things. And now he's the chief AI officer over at Velatura. Prashant, welcome back to Inside Analysis.
It's great to be here, Eric. It's been a hot minute
It's been a
since
while.
we spoke. It's been a while. A lot has happened, but it's always great to be back on the OG show of data management, analytics, machine learning, and now AI.
Yeah.
So very well deserved. And I know there are so many big names in the field today who, in addition to me, recognize where we all got started, either catching up on your shows or appearing on them. So
Well, there you go.
great to be back.
We're doing the best we can. And I tell you what, it's a fascinating world. I mean, 17 years ago when I launched DM Radio, I knew data was going to be big. I mean, that's why I launched the show. And I also knew there's so many smart people in this business. And you know what? What I've learned, at least in the data and analytics business, smart people want to share what they know. They don't want to keep it to themselves. They're not like, maybe lawyers in some sense or researchers in some other sense. A lot of people want to keep the data to themselves or the news media. They want to hide pieces of truth. No, no, no. We want to share information. We want to share what we know because we're trying to improve the overall industry. We're trying to improve outcomes and lives. And well, there's no better place to do that than in the healthcare world. And it's a very challenging environment. I've thought many times about HIPAA, and of course, it was designed to protect information. There's all this effort to protect information, which I understand, privacy reasons and so forth. But ideally, you want to share the information. You want to share real, raw, granular information about health outcomes to understand disease better, to understand population health, to come up with better solutions, whether it's sometimes pharmaceuticals or other times dietary, health style, living, what you do every day. So being able to share that data, well, that's what Velatura does. Do you want to give us sort of an overview of A, what a public benefit corporation is, and B, how that affects what you do at Velatura?
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Very quickly, a public benefit corporation, I would say the most prominent example of that today is Patagonia.
Hmm.
So essentially, a public benefit corporation, it's a specific US tax code that makes a corporation a public benefit corporation. And what that effectively means for the layperson is that our margins are capped at a certain percentage by the US government. And it doesn't mean we're not allowed to make more. But what it means is, unlike your traditional for profit company, what it means is beyond the margin, we need to continue to innovate and keep lights on and continue to grow within reason. The
Hmm.
rest has to be given back to citizens and the country, which we do in various forms through multiple programs that are both high-touch human programs as well as digital programs, data packs, etc., that we provide. So what it also means is we operate at the intersection of public-private partnerships and the for-profit, not-for-profit intersection. So Velatura itself has both. We have for-profit arms which build software platforms. We have not-for-profit arms that serve as trusted data sharing organizations, health data utilities, and state-level jurisdictional entities. So why has the federal government allowed people like us and Patagonia? Because we serve a mission beyond the immediate quarter on the stock market, and
Hmm.
we serve a vision beyond returning investors a ton of money. That doesn't mean those things don't matter. It
Right.
doesn't mean OpEx doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that ROI doesn't matter. Of course, they matter to us.
Right.
As we like to say, you can't have you can't do charity if you don't have wealth to do it
Right.
from.
Right.
right? So from that
Right.
perspective, we still need to do all the things that private companies do. But at the same time, we need to keep in mind that the larger mission we are doing it for, like you said, Eric, is to do good for people and the communities they live in. So we have a very strong touch point because of our state focus and our local focus in each community. So think of us as really bringing the best of digital in a trusted way to drive sharing, also driven by individual, family, and community engagement. So
Hmm.
we are the bridge, you could argue, between brick and mortar and digital on one hand,
Hmm.
emotional experience and economic experiences on the other.
Hmm, that's interesting. And you're also responsible for paying attention to how data that you help share gets used, right? You have a sort of responsibility around that when you help broker deals, when you help deliver data that an organization can use for its benefits. You're really a steward for the state, isn't that right?
That's right. We are a steward on behalf of the state or an entity that has been set up based on state money in many cases, but it can also be that our customers broadly, Eric, can be healthcare, health systems, community health centers, hospitals, health insurance companies, accountable care organizations, but also state governments. So in each state, in America, each state has its own rules in healthcare, insurance, and places like that. So, for
Hmm.
example, we have a real life example where in the state of Maryland, you can send your processing, I'm just making this up, you can send your data for processing to another state, say Delaware or Nevada, but you can't do that with pregnancy data.
Hmm.
You can't do that. In certain other states, you can do it for pregnancy data, but you can't do it for behavioral health data.
Hmm.
You can't even send it outside the state. So
Wow.
even the processing has to happen within the physical boundaries of the state. That's
Hmm.
like an extreme example of state policies that deter it. So which is why it's important for us to set up these what we call TDSOs, trusted data sharing organizations, in each at the individual state level
Hmm.
to protect that state jurisdiction on behalf of the state, but more importantly, on behalf of the citizens of the state.
Right. A TDSO is what it's called. It's
A
basically.
trusted data sharing organization, with the key word being trust.
Hmm. And this is all through AWS, is that right?
Our current stack is heavily invested in AWS.
Hmm.
Uh, our cloud platform is AWS. Our AI is happening mostly off of AWS, but I also use quite a bit of open source in that cloud environment. Um, AWS has been a good partner. So, and they do have a long history in healthcare. So,
Mm.
given that, the other thing I forgot to say was, as you know, you mentioned HIPAA high trust. We are the high trust environments in at least 10 states in the US. So
Wow.
we do that on top of AWS. We add a whole bunch of things. So for people who don't have a high trust environment, they can come to us and we can enable that for them.
Oh, that's
Again,
cool.
keeping the trust in mind. So yes, AWS, in the last year and a half, Eric, the company has made a significant investment in DocuSign as a strategic partner. We
Mm.
have been the first at the forefront of using DocuSign's intelligent agreement management platform, ID verification services, along with our AI and our data, and in order to build Consent Manager Plus.
Hmm.
And at this time, we are also looking at a third partner uh, in the space. Yeah, as so, it's going to be a one partner on the cloud, one partner on intelligent agreements, intelligent contracts, documentation, which is always a heavy healthcare thing, and a third partner on absolutely cutting edge AI is where my focus is right now.
Yeah, maybe that's a good topic to dive into is what are you working on? Like what kind of AI solutions are you developing? Before the call, we were just kind of chatting and catching up and you notice what I've noticed, which is that large language models hit the market and have sucked up all the oxygen. Everybody's talking about these things, these huge behemoth models, which is odd because, of course, Sam Altman said like a year ago, the age of the large language model is over. And everyone would kind of scratch their head like, what is he talking about? And I think my theory, just a theory, is that he was basically saying, look, these things are unwieldy. They're so big, they're so massive. We don't really understand how they work. Well, that's not good for things like auditability. That's not good for things like explainability. And I'll throw this at you and then you just kind of comment on it. But I thought it's so interesting that in the information world, we have spent the last half century perfecting the foundation, which is the database. We made it faster, more performance, be able to serve more concurrent users, different functionality, different kinds of queries, connectivity, all kind of stuff we built. But one thing was never in question, and that was accuracy, meaning whatever you put in the database is what you got out, period. No questions asked. Now, with large language models, you take these stochastic, probabilistic entities and slap it on the end of this pristine workflow, and it's all of a sudden you're like throwing the baby out with the bathwater on on the data quality side. So all of a sudden we're in this sort of reverse position trying to tame the monster that we've created with rag models and graph rag models and all these other things. But the point is, it's still stochastic, it's still probabilistic, which means it'll never be completely accurate. In healthcare, of course, you want things to be completely accurate. But what do you think about that massive shift in energy and innovation and technology and where we're all going?
Eric, my friend, you know that I would not come here without at least one controversial opinion. And for you, as you saw from my LinkedIn post, as the bad boy of AI, definitely health AI, I have to give you at least two controversial points.
All right.
So I'm going to do that. I think the first thing is I'd argue with, I'd agree with you first before I argue, but I'm going to challenge some assumptions that I think people are still operating under.
All right. Good.
I would argue that the old school relational database world, where I spent half my career at Oracle for 10 years, other places before that, um, I would argue we're worse stochastic parrots than what we have today
Hmm.
because they were focused on capturing structured data in a CRM or an ERP or a patient registration system or a customer registration system. And all we cared about was what's the minimal information I can type in so that I can form a picture to make a transaction happen. I was not interested in the full customer. I
Mm-hmm.
was interested in a departmental view of a customer to get my transaction done. And as you and I, we both made our careers making money off of that in bringing data warehouses and bots and cubes together, Eric, well before
Mm-hmm.
ML became real. We led
Right.
the way into ML becoming what it is today, right?
Right.
Both of us. And so given that, I would argue that the previous world was not any more comprehensive or complete than what it is today. We could not deal with unstructured data in any form.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost trying to form a view of our neighbor by not talking to them, by ignoring them, but trying to use a telescope at night to figure out how they are behaving in the bathroom. Right. So I
That's
would
funny.
argue that the previous models were not necessarily great. They were
Hmm.
easier to explain, they were easier for humans to trace. And when Sam Altman is talking about bigger is not always better, his models have started becoming even bigger in the last year since he said that.
Yeah. Right.
So it's one thing to say bigger is not always better. But I think and this is a debate I had with some prominent people in the space in the Valley about a year ago, which is, are we going to get away from large models into small models? And is distillation of larger into small models going to do that? The consensus right now, Eric, seems to be that bigger is better,
Mm-hmm.
but not always. The failure of Llama 4 tells us very clearly just because it had more billion parameters didn't make it a better model than OpenAI's models, which were smaller, or DeepSeek's models, which were smaller.
Mm-hmm.
It failed nevertheless.
Mm-hmm.
So bigger is not always better. But on the other hand, I would say that technology has also evolved away from pure large language models to reasoning models and mixture of experts models. And today, the conversation seems to be more multimodal. So
Hmm.
I don't see how, when you add image and video vectors, that these models become smaller. But on the other hand, if the question is, do I always need the largest model for a 99% accuracy task every time? I think the answer is clearly no, because there are very few tasks in the world that require 99% accuracy. For
Hmm.
90% accuracy, can I get away with a smaller model? Yes. And that's the approach we have taken. We have taken the approach of Claude 3.7 and 3.5 for our internal and external use. We tried multiple models, small ones, medium sized ones, large ones. And what we found was stability in responses, tighter evaluation parameters, and controlled hallucination management are more important than the number of billion parameters that you have. Having said that, I can also confirm that the really small models, the 7, 15, 32 billion models, are pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
So the small, I'm not talking about non-digital models, right? So I'll just say that it's a mixed bag.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, we're coming up on our first break here. I've already got some more questions in my head for Prashant about where things are going and how Velatura is using this information, how they're using AI to better perform their jobs. I mean, there are it's dizzying when you think about the number of ways that you can skin the cat these days. Like there are just countless different ways to do things. We'll talk about another company I came across here maybe in the next segment, but AI models. I mean, you made a point before the show that they're going to be here forever. Like this is the next wave. I'm definitely positive of that, and I think most software companies need to figure out where they fit in this new world. Is it as an adjunct? Is it as just a component part to the bigger picture? Do they need to embrace AI, whether it is for a chatbot of their own? I mean, so many things are happening. Stack Overflow, I read, lost half their traffic, half their web traffic, because people were just using ChatGPT to ask questions. That's an existential threat for a media company. So we'll talk about all that when we come back, folks. Don't touch a dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis with Prashant Natarajan from his newest company, Velatura. It's Velatura.org. Look these folks up. Public Benefit Corporation. So it's always a good cause. It's designed to work with both public and private organizations on a pretty sticky issue. I mean, there's some heavy duty fines if you violate the rules of HIPAA. So you guys are not. You're not cowards. I'll say that. You're going into battle in a very, very strong, meaningful way, using AI wherever you can. We're talking about accuracy in the last segment, and it's out of the box, a lot of LLMs are like 80% accurate, and that sounds great. But then I ask people, okay, what part of your business can be wrong 20% of the time? And the answer is, well, not much. So where do you draw the line? I've talked to a lot of different companies. Data Squared is a very interesting company working with Neo4j. They have an approach where they use a knowledge graph as a component part. So you have all your enterprise systems on the bottom. They build a knowledge graph on top of that. Then you use modeled context protocol, and then you hit the LLM up here because the MCP allows the LLM to reach into your knowledge graph and find relationships, because relationships really, really matter. I'm sure that's especially true in the healthcare space where you're trying to relate certain medications to certain conditions, to certain people with certain blood types and so forth. Relationships are really, really important. They give a lot of good context to ground these answers. So that's the best that I've come across in terms, and there are other ones. There's like Vectara, which in fact the co-founder of Cloudera is over there, Amar Awadallah. I talked to him. They have a separate model that comes in and kind of vets, looks at everything, says, okay, well, this was the prompt. This is the answer. Does that look good? If the answer is no, go back and try it again. So these are quality assurance mechanisms, basically. But what do you think? What's your quality assurance mechanism over at your company?
It's multiple, multiple. So at the base, I think let's break this into two things. And why accuracy both matters and why it's more challenging. Those of us who come from the data science, machine learning world, uh, who also were early adopters of the large language model world, our biggest problem was really understanding the concept of accuracy in data science is
Hmm.
always evolving where you want it to improve.
Hmm.
And a lot of structured algorithms, linear algorithms helped us do that. When deep learning came in, that started becoming a problem because you started having millions of layers. And we were trying to use things like Lime and SHAP and ReLU and stuff like that to create surrogate models. And today, with large language models, it's become a completely different beast. I would posit, though, that it's not a fair comparison. In terms of the early days when we were dealing with structured data and classification, regression, and time series problems, accuracy was an easier thing to measure because you had to look at precision, recall, and stuff like that. Today, you're dealing with more ambiguous sentences. We are dealing with voice, we are dealing with images. And these models are not necessarily statistical models per se that work on numerical quantities.
Hmm.
They are language, next letter, next token prediction models. And why this distinction is important is because the traditional definitions of accuracy in machine learning data science don't, in my opinion, apply here.
Hmm.
Because in this world, the accuracy is partly also as observed by the observer. I would
Interesting.
say that a hallucination is if I ask a large language model, take a screenshot of a picture, feed it, and say who's the more handsome one of these two over here in this picture. If it says Eric, I'm going to tell you that this model hallucinates really badly.
That's funny.
Because a hallucination like beauty is an eye of the beholder. If you like the answer, you say, oh, this generative model is great. At that point, you don't care about whether it's 77% accurate or 87% accurate. So I think
Right.
that's one thing to understand, that the nature of accuracy in the generative world is very different from the rest. Having said that, we still calculate accuracy. We still calculate the response vis-a-vis the confidence score for every answer to every prompt, like you said.
Hmm.
And that is done at the embedding level because we know embeddings have problems,
Hmm.
right? Semantic distance is not necessarily always a resolution
Sure.
for like concepts,
Right. Sure.
right? In the old NLP world. So we look at
Right.
that. We also look at, I think the Vectora was the company you mentioned, the ones who are looking at like an LLM as a judge, right? You have
Right.
almost an adversarial approach to evaluation. So we are looking at that, right? We are also, but I think the key thing is because of the point I made that a generative AI's model is as much in the eye of the beholder from a task completion perspective.
Hmm.
Human feedback is our most important evaluation criteria. Our
Hmm.
users with our internal tools have the option of not using the AI answer or modifying it with human feedback
Hmm.
based on what they know better
Hmm.
and retraining the model. So every bit of that goes back into our models to retrain them.
That's great. And so you built these models, and then to your point, they are incrementally learning through feedback, and end users can say, no, that's not right. This is correct. And that gets fed back into the model. Is that right?
It gets so multiple things happen, and you're going to love this. You use the word MCP, so I'll use MCP. We are able to connect our centralized knowledge base thing. Internally, we call it IntelliBot. Okay, so we use that internally. It's not just RAG; it's much more than that. It's a complete working agentic system. We've got MCP in production with Atlassian, with GitLab, the bunch of things. So IntelliBot is our centralized interface for every employee in the company to use.
Hmm.
Then when they choose, they like the answers, they can press a button and create a Jira card for developers to pick up. If they
Hmm.
don't like the answer, they can actually just delete it. They
Hmm.
don't need to use it. But when they have feedback on the answer, they're not ready to put it in a Jira card. They put it back into the bot and say, go back, use the refresh agent to go refresh your answers for this prompt. So that
Hmm.
goes to that specific knowledge base just created for that agent and goes and updates that. It doesn't go touch the foundational knowledge.
Interesting. That's
So
very
we
wild.
update the knowledge base with the answers.
Yeah. Every and the knowledge base, is that a graph or what is that actual the
The
entity
knowledge
itself?
base can, believe it or not, it can be anything. We haven't connected to a graph. It can be a graph. Today we support Jira, SharePoint, Confluence, any S3 bucket,
Hmm.
any website.
Interesting. So it's basically almost like a reference architecture that reaches into all these other
Yes,
stores of information and then brings
yes,
back what you want.
yes, yes.
That's cool.
The way I see this is that AI, and others have said this, Andre Karpathy has talked about this. People talk about it. What I'm building is the new operating system of our enterprise is AI.
Interesting. That
Everything
this is
else is either a source or a target.
right, right. Well, that's a very interesting point that you make. And so AI agents. What is an AI agent? It is apparently autonomous. It can take decisions. There's this beliefs, desires, intentions model that some people are talking about, which makes sense. Beliefs are what it believes to be true. Desires are what it wants to do. Intentions, how it's going to actually accomplish that. You obviously have to have these guys talking to each other and orchestrating amongst themselves, but really, that's an intermediary layer which can then reach into storage, which can talk to an application. It is a new architecture. I mean, you think about when we were on-prem and then you had cloud. So okay, now you have hybrid cloud. Then you have multi-cloud. Like, okay, now this is interesting. I got to track all this stuff all over the place. But and then you have the edge too. So you have the data center on-prem and the edge, which is like another sort of layer in an architecture. We see the similar thing now in this new world, this new agentic world, where we do have these agents that can grab data from storage, they can hit an application, they can go across the network, they do all kinds of things. That's a very different architecture than client server, right?
It's a very different architecture. And also, I would say one of the most hyped architectures in 2025. Because, and Eric, you know this, because I wrote about contextually intelligent agents in 2017 in my book, Demystifying Big Data and Machine Learning for Healthcare. And it amuses me that all of a sudden, 7 years later, everybody is talking agents. I'm happy,
Right.
don't get me
Right.
wrong. But I think people are ignoring what I wrote about,
Hmm.
which is an agent has to be contextual and it has to be intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
Intelligence means it has to learn from every interaction, which means your underlying workflows and operations need to be of a much better quality than businesses have gotten away with today.
Mm. Wow.
They
Right.
are not.
Right.
So instead of intelligent, what you're getting is really a repeat of RPA.
Hmm.
So it's the AI washing of RPA, which is what today's agents are.
Right.
So you take bad practices, bad workflows, bad data, bad processes, and you're now saying that you put a bunch of stupid people in the room together and have them multiply, and you're going to get a bunch of Nobel Prize winners out of it. No, you're not. Biology and history tells us that's not going to happen. So
Right.
I would posit that in order for these agents to really become useful and to bring value the way people are talking about, they have to learn from good practices. So we have to invest in good practices first.
Mm-hmm.
Second is they have to become contextual. Today's agents are really like AI. Attach a LLM to an RPA bot and people think it's an agent. No, it's not. That is actually a confused stochastic parrot, I would argue.
Right. That's pretty funny. A confused stochastic parrot. That's not so good. And we've seen some of that with Siri. You've seen, Siri come up with some really bad answers and just not have any idea what you're talking about. It's like, no, 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 no. I mean, you do have to get under the weeds. One of the things I've been saying to people on this show is if you want to leverage the power of AI, you've got to get your data house in order. And you're kind of saying you also have to get your process house in order. And I look at all this stuff, and I'm hearing what you're saying, which is like, if you don't do this right, it's just again RPA, robotic process automation. It's a bit of a bulky term, but you're just automating things. I mean, what is an agent if not a multi-layered automation engine that is semi-autonomous, right?
Tim Pletcher, my boss, Velatura's founder and CEO, and I have been always, we have launched an AI First for People program.
Mm.
And the keywords are AI First for People.
Mm-hmm.
The Silicon Valley runs, which I was a former resident of, card carrying member of the Silicon Valley for a long time. Um, they always talk about automation as if like we can all manage without people.
Mm-hmm.
First, it's a very dystopian view. Second, it's not driven by the history of technology. Every technology revolution has made us wealthier, more comfortable, and lazier.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want AI to do. And so I think we are still in early days. But AI first for people means, Eric, that it's not AI first for automation so that you automate bad processes. It means
Mm-hmm.
empowering people, amplifying and assisting them so
Mm-hmm.
that you can do more with less,
Mm-hmm.
not more with nothing.
Right. Well, and you can, so getting back to the task at hand here, which is what you folks are working on with this information exchange. The more clever AI or machine learning pays attention to what you're doing. I mean, I've noticed Google baking some stuff into the covers for a while now. When I'm sending emails to a certain group, it'll say, "Oh, should we add Prashant because he's been on this thread before?" And it's like, "Yeah, actually, that is what I want to do." And I think that the value is going to manifest largely in the form of suggestions. It's going to say, "Hey, you want to try this or you want to try that?" And you can say yes or no. So you're still in control, but you're sort of you're leveraging the power of automation by taking suggestions from the engine. And then a more clever machine would then track, okay, how often does Prashant say no? And then things don't work out, right?
Within reason, right? I mean, I also believe that the modern corporate enterprise is got a lot of jobs where people are just pushing the equivalent of digital paper from point A to point B.
Right, sure.
I think there's a ton of waste. There's a ton of,
Yeah, right.
right, all the things that like we are discovering both in the public and private sector. So I would like to think that every worker would love to have their lives being a little less soul killing and a little more inspirational and aspirational.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is not to replace humans with AI robots, but to replace the robot inside humans with a better robot.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a good one. I like
So
that.
I'm not saying there won't be replacement. There will be
Mm.
replacement. We have to
Right.
get used to the idea.
Right.
But then we have to really question ourselves, were those real jobs to start with?
Right. Sure.
And that
Yeah.
reckoning is coming. And I hope people understand that that's going to be in the near term a dangerous thing because people are always nervous about stuff they don't understand.
Right.
But like the steam engine, this promises more comfort, more wealth, and more prosperity for all of us.
No, that's exactly right. Well, good point. We'll be right back, folks. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis. Oops. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis with Prashant Natarajan from Velatura. They are a public benefit corporation, so they're out there trying to help us all get better access to healthcare information. Healthcare, you look at HIPAA, you look at big major diseases like multiple sclerosis. I know all about multiple sclerosis. The more research we can do on that, the better off we can be. There are lots of theories about it. A lot of people in the Pittsburgh area, for some reason, has it. Maybe because of chemicals. Maybe because the skies are gray very often. You don't get a whole lot of sunlight. The brain feeds off of light. The human brain likes to have light. It goes through your pupils, it activates, it like adjusts all the myelin that's in your brain, and it gets things done. So research, I mean, that's really what you're doing is you're trying to help organizations better manage their healthcare data, whether it be for insurance purposes, for billing purposes, or just for health purposes, for research purposes. All those are use cases for Velatura, right?
All of them are use cases. Care delivery is our number one use case, making sure the right person gets the right care at the right time.
Hmm.
So, care delivery, in the end, we are in the business of service, health and human service specifically. So, in the end, it's about delivering care. The second thing is because we work in any system, care is not for free. Somebody has to pay for it, or
Mm-hmm.
somebody has to subsidize it, or somebody has to do something about it. So we have, in addition to hospitals and health systems, payers, accountable care organizations, HMOs, who are we work with, they are both our users and our customers. And then the third thing is things like what you talked about, research. One of those things we believe that AI can play a particularly important role is in rare disease
Mm.
because of both the paucity of data. There's a reason a rare disease is called a rare disease. It's because it's rare.
Mm-hmm.
Autoimmune diseases are also a huge problem because they're almost personalized diseases of one for that particular individual. Many cancers. Today, we know that breast cancer is not one cancer condition. It's multiple cancers that all occur in the organ called the human breast in a female, or a
Mm.
male breast too, but mostly females, obviously. So AI is going to give us access to the data we have and get to new insights from that. But I'd say the bigger option with AI is coming up with new repurposed molecules, new combinatorial molecules for treatment that are far cheaper than what it
Mm.
costs us today, which is hundreds of millions to create a blockbuster drug. Also synthetic biology. So
Mm.
the day we are able to understand a human cell, then I think our understanding of disease goes up. We are nowhere close to that.
Mm.
So I think we're just getting started, Eric. I hesitate to say that we're going to cure all diseases because of AI, but I would say our grandkids will be in a much better positions, like our grandparents, right? Our grandparents, our great grandparents mostly died young of other diseases, not lifestyle diseases, not cancer.
Mm.
So in the
Mm-hmm.
same way, I think our grandkids will look at us and say, what diabetes? We can't imagine that these people actually died of diabetes. We can't imagine people were ill because of MS
Mm.
or because of epilepsy. I think we'll see those diseases the way you and I probably look at bubonic plague or smallpox today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful stuff. And so, and your company sits in between. So you'll work with a hospital and an insurer, for example, or just directly with the hospital if you're talking about care. So are you actually leveraging data from Epic, for example? I mean, do you take that
Yes.
model into consideration and you as you're because yeah,
We get
Epic is
data
in
from everybody
Epic.
because we serve as a jurisdictional trusted data sharing organization,
Mm-hmm.
both in the HIE context and in the trusted data context. We get, if the hospital is sending us data, it can come from a clinic, outpatient electronic health record. It could come from the VA through what they are using. It can come through Epic. It can come through Oracle Sono. All of that we get today. If it's an insurance company, obviously it's going to be other systems that are
Right.
going to be sending and receiving information.
You
In
know,
case of government, Medicaid programs are very popular ones.
mm,
Quality reporting is very popular. So the use cases can be pretty multiple. What I'm doing now with AI to answer your specific question is two things. I'll talk about three things actually. One is taking a look at our existing data platform products and interoperability products and
mm,
seeing how AI can improve our personalization and speed to market with AI as an internal asset for product and development. So
mm,
that's one. The second is to look at AI as an accelerator for the end customer experience,
mm,
where we don't just rely on things like videos and manuals and traditional support tickets, but we provide fully functional chatbots
mm,
that touch into these knowledge bases that people can use, but still give them the option of connecting with us and opening a ticket through the bot,
mhm,
frankly, right? So
mm.
that they can even troubleshoot, put pieces of code in the bot and get an answer. So
Wow.
that level of sophistication. The third piece is building new products, taking advantage of our experience like Consent Manager Plus, which is a brand new product we released recently, building on top of DocuSign's intelligent agreement management platform and Velatura's private models and AI workflows, which I can't go into detail, but it's really the idea of empowering patients and clinicians and administrators in order, with the simple thing of a consent form that all of us sign. Most of
Mm.
us don't even read it when we sign it.
Right,
Most
right,
of us sign hundreds of it, but
right.
we literally sign our lives away without getting any value out of it. So we want to change that equation, given that do good part of it.
Hmm.
So yes, there will be commercial applications for payers, providers, pharma companies, insurance companies. These are all people reaching out to us right now because consent is very important. But we are also focusing on helping parents with their kids'
Mm.
behavioral health challenges. We are focusing on helping kids help put their parents in a hospice when that unfortunate decision has to be taken on consent. So we are getting into these deep emotional areas that are not always pure economics, but still
Right.
are important to that human being in question.
Hmm. Yeah, we got about 3 minutes left in this segment. I'm going to throw one of my curveballs at you. I've been reading these bizarre stories out of Anthropic, and I hear great things about Claude. But the Anthropic folks, they keep talking about how the agent is blackmailing people as a last resort if it's going to be turned off. And I'm thinking to myself, what on earth are you guys talking about? And I think that this is the text coming back from the engine. And that's not what an agent does. An agent actually takes actions and does things. So if they have like Claude, an agent that's actually turning off systems in the business because it doesn't want to be taken out, well, that's a problem. But I don't think that's what's happening here. But what I think is just bizarre is there's so much of this personification of AI that I think is very unhelpful. Like in one of the articles, the guy wrote something like, well, it's only happening in tense situations. I'm like, there's no tense situation for an algorithm. Okay. The tension of a situation is dealing with humans who have emotions and lives to live and fears and other palpable organic realities that AI models do not have. So, what do you think about this hyper
You know,
personification of AI?
it's ridiculous, is what I would say it is.
Right. That's what I said.
And
That's right.
Eric, I have about as much legit chops in this space as a global expert in health AI, the most difficult use cases of AI, as anybody else.
Right.
I think I wrote the first global bestseller on healthcare data science and machine learning 8 years ago, right?
Right.
I've got hundreds of thousands of my models in production, probably more than the next 10 people in the world put together in a way that is impactful to people. And I just don't understand this. There is so much that we can do here. 1 year ago, I don't know if you remember, Eric, about a year and a half ago, there's this guy from Google who said that Google's Gemini developed sentience and then he resigned from Google. No news of that fellow now,
Right.
right? I mean, it's been a year and a half since apparently they discovered sentience, but beyond that buzz and the media stories,
Right.
Gemini hasn't done anything.
Right.
Google is trying to still make a better product out of it. Let's be fair.
Right.
Well, before it develops its own mind, for God's sake.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
its own mind didn't prevent it from painting all popes as black as
Right.
it did a year ago. So
That's
I
true.
just don't understand this stuff. And I think Claude and Anthropic, much as I love their models, we must understand where they came from.
Right.
These are the folks who thought OpenAI was not doing enough on safety and alignment and broke out of OpenAI to
Right.
come up with more edge cases that frighten more people. So much as I love Anthropic, I love their models. I said we are using them extensively. I really think it's not helpful to convert these models into some kind of AI sentient beings because
Right.
frankly, they are not.
To even talk about these things, like I say, the personification. They said, "Oh, it's a stressful situation." There's no stressful situation for any algorithm anywhere or ever will be. I promise. But folks,
Well, not just that. The
don't touch that dial.
CFO of OpenAI
We'll
comes
be
out.
right back. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis on Standby. All right, folks, back here for our podcast bonus segment. Final 8 minutes with Prashant Natarajan of Velatura, right? Very, very cool company out there these days. Not Vectara. That's another company doing similar things. No, Velatura. It's a corporate, it's a Corporation for Public Benefit, CBP, right? Corporation for Public Benefit. Really good stuff. But we're just joking about all this talk about personification of AI models and, oh, the jobs are going to go away. I mean, you are going to see people getting laid off. That's more a cost cutting measure than anything because if you train your staff to use these machines, to use these models as they are intended to be used, you'll get 10x performers or like 3x performers out of everyone because you can learn so much so quickly. You can drill down on anything, and they're getting very good at checking out recent things. At least ChatGPT is. I don't know about the others. I
We
was
have our
Gemini.
own enterprise stuff which we are using because of the healthcare context. We can't send PHI or PII to Copilot or ChatGPT. So we take an extremely conservative view,
Right,
like we and legal firms. So we use our own stuff. We don't want to be at the mercy of some public cloud provider
right, sure,
either. But again, to wrap up on the last one, the CFO of OpenAI came out and said we are going to launch $2,000 PhD agents about 3 months ago. Last I checked, universities haven't stopped training PhD people,
right,
nor our corporations stopped hiring PhD people. In fact, if you look at the ridiculous offers that Meta has put out, $100 billion, $300+ billion compensation packages,
right,
I think the 2000 that OpenAI is offering its PhD agents, nobody is hiring them, right?
right,
Meta is not paying them even 2000 for that PhD agent. So I think once we get past the hype, Eric, like you said, there's some real use cases here
right,
and real value that it can bring to humans.
right,
Short of we're going to replace all of you so that the AI and the AI can do business with each other. What is
right.
most of us going to do? Like carry our begging bowls?
Right. It's just, it's crazy. It is a tool to be used. It's a very powerful new Google. I mean, let's face it, Google, in a way, Google blindsided Microsoft with Google Docs, which I thought was great. I was like, how the hell did Microsoft not figure this one out first? But they didn't. They got accustomed to their way of doing business, and the silos appear in organizations and all kinds of things happen. But Google just got blindsided. They got blockbustered, basically. I remember when
I I thought,
Blockbuster.
I thought, Eric, interestingly, Google got blindsided by Google.
Yeah, in a way. Right. Sure. By not really seeing the long distance, not
Kind
not
of the
seeing the
Kodak
future.
syndrome, right? They
Right.
couldn't bear the idea of cannibalizing search.
Right. Which they're going to have to now. Like I was talking with you before, maybe let's close on this. And my advice to out there to folks, especially the search engine world, is if you want to get attracted by ChatGPT, you need to hire trusted voices with trusted, proven channels to discuss exactly what you're doing and be very detailed about it. And then you need to write articles about that and really populate your message in multiple channels because that's what ChatGPT does. It scours the web. It's amazing what they're doing now. It looks very expensive though, I have to say. If it takes 40 seconds to come back with my answer, there's a lot of tokens that went into banging all that stuff out. So they're still at a lost leader point, I think, on the financial side here. But it's amazing what they're doing because clearly it's a multi-step process. It searches the web, it identifies a handful of sources, then it pulls all that into a sort of cache that it uses to write its summary, and then it'll cite different sources. Now, it doesn't always get it right. It does still hallucinate a little bit, but the point is, it's trying to triangulate the truth from multiple different trusted sources in real time and then share you its summary. That is amazing stuff for research, for staying on top of things, and frankly, for cutting a lot of the BS out. Like one of the marketing guys I know, Mark Himmick, he said, "Yeah, it's going to kill the vanity metrics." And I'm all for killing vanity metrics dead because they don't matter. They're vanity metrics. But what do you think? Closing thoughts.
I completely agree with what you said. We are seeing a reinvention of what is traditional computing. We are seeing a reinvention of search. I also posit that AI becomes digital and digital becomes AI, and there's going to be no difference between the two.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
and if you're not AI first, you're digital last.
Hmm. Wow. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I do still wonder, and then we got time for maybe one more question. You look at something like Epic, which is an incredibly complex entity. I mean, it has to be. I can't imagine like how just oh my god, the number of tables, the layers, the architecture. I'd almost rather, not even think about it than think about it at all because it's that damn complicated. I think you are going to see a new generation of tools come around that will pull from Epic, but give you a different interface for solving your day-to-day problems. And then they'll persist what needs to be persisted, but it'll be like your little it's kind of like a chat bot, a little agent that'll reach into these environments, but then just kind of help you get through stuff because the old-fashioned way of populating those things is such a drag, is such a nightmare. Whereas now you can just talk into your phone, it automatically converts to text, and then it does the things for you. I think that's going to happen. What do you think?
I think in the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to be seeing holograms and avatars that we can conjure on demand,
Hmm.
that we can give instructions to,
Mm-hmm.
that basically then goes off in the background. And when I'm sipping my brandy and my having a cigar, it comes back at 8 p.m. and says, "These are all the things I did. I had a problem over here. This, I think, needs you to really step in
Right.
because historically you have been confused about it. So I didn't want to take a decision for you.
That's funny.
And by the way, you really should stop smoking those cigars." So I think we are going to get to that point in about 3 years, not beyond.
That's wild. Well, it's always a pleasure talking to Prashant Natarajan. Look him up on LinkedIn. Velatura is the company, Velatura.org. It's a .org, which means it's there for a good cause and they're helping. So if you're in the healthcare industry, actually, I'll say on air, you should look into Blue Street Data right here in Pittsburgh. It's spun out of University of UPitt, I guess. And they are all about data brokering and sharing and serving as a liaison for data brokers and data buyers. So I think you should talk to those folks because they'll have a lot to
You
say.
always connect me to the coolest people, Eric.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I remember the last one. I shared the interview stage with somebody from, I think, the former State Department.
Wow.
So, so you always connect me to cool people. I look forward to it, and thank you for your time as always.
You bet, folks. We'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.